right in the middle of my daughter's wedding. My son-in-law punched me straight in the face. Glasses shattered. Over 200 people froze in silence. Blood ran down my collar, while he shouted that I was just a useless old man living in the past. No one moved, not even my daughter. I wiped the blood off, smiled, and said, "All right then." They didn't know. That punch was the beginning of a storm. Before I tell you the rest of this story, hit subscribe so we can meet again in many more stories to come. I stood there, under the dim golden lights of the hall, the wedding music still playing, mocking me. No one came near. Every face around me stared at that 6-tier wedding cake, pretending a man hadn't just been punched at his own daughter's wedding. I bent down, picked up my broken glasses. Blood seeped through the napkin, salty on my lips. Dylan, my new son-in-law, was still standing there, breathing hard, fists clenched. Not a hint of regret in his eyes. "You should know your place, Harold," he said quietly, just loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Your time is over." Then he turned, took Amelia's hand, my daughter, and walked up to the stage, leaving me in the whispers of the guests. I watched them go. Her white dress shimmered under the lights, a distant glow. No trace of the little girl who once held my hand to learn how to walk. I walked out of the hall, silently. Outside, Seattle was raining. Raindrops fell on my hair, my face, mixing with the blood still dripping from my lip. I opened the car door, sat in the dark, and exhaled slowly. No anger, no pain. Just a cold emptiness spreading in my chest. The phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from an old friend: "Mark, everything's ready. Just say the word start." I stared at it for a long time, then slipped the phone back into my coat. Not yet. Before I strike back, I need to remember why I was punched and why I stayed silent. 3 months before the wedding, Dylan started getting restless about my cabin. He spoke like he was pitching a business deal. "This area's rising fast. If you sell now, you could move into a retirement home. We'll help with the paperwork." I remember chuckling. "I'm not selling." His eyes changed. He looked at me like I was standing in his way. Amelia was softer, but in her eyes I saw the same flicker of contempt. She used to sit in my wood shop playing with sawdust and scraps of pine. Now she sat across from me in a cafe, voice cold as rain. "Dad, Dylan and I need a fresh start. It's a waste for you to live there alone." I didn't answer. Just watched the rain running down the window. Some things don't need explaining, not when the listener has already stopped caring. They thought I was poor. They saw my old pickup truck, my sandwich dinners, my worn-out shirts. They didn't know every table and chair I built was commissioned by Havenwood, the luxury furniture company in Tacoma, where I'm the largest shareholder. I stayed silent, because I once believed family meant more than money. But that punch shattered it all. After the reception, I didn't go home. I drove to the old pier where my wife and I used to fish every Sunday evening. The night air was cold and salty. I turned on the radio. A faint country song played through the static. Dylan's words echoed in my head. "You're just a useless man living off the past." I looked at my calloused hands, the same hands that built hundreds of tables, that held my daughter when she was scared, that carried fallen soldiers off the field long ago. If that's what they call useless, then maybe this generation needs to relearn what it means to be a man. I took out my phone and called Mark. "You still have the Havenwood papers?" His voice came steady through the line. "I do. Guess it's time." I looked out at the dark sea. "Not yet," I whispered. "But soon." 3 days after the wedding, an envelope arrived from the bank, a request to transfer the house to Amelia Cooper. I didn't need to guess who was behind it. I just smiled, folded the envelope, and tucked it away right next to the signed Havenwood contracts. I don't need revenge through fists. I'll let them fall into the truth, the very thing they've ignored for so long. That punch at the wedding didn't knock me down. It woke me up, and for the first time in years, I knew exactly what I had to do next. I couldn't sleep that night. The sound of that punch kept echoing in my head, like a hammer striking solid wood, heavy, sharp, leaving a crack nothing could fill. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dylan's face, the way he held his head high before the crowd, and Amelia, standing behind him silent. I used to think my daughter would run to me, place her hand on my shoulder, just like she did when she was little. But that look in her eyes that day, empty, cold, it told me I was just a stranger now. The next morning I went back to the workshop. The sound of the saw, the scent of pine, the dust in the air, it all steadied my mind. The thing about craftsmanship is, it never betrays you. You give it your effort, and it gives you form and purpose in return. I was sanding down a table for a restaurant order when Mark showed up. Old war buddy, now the finance manager for Havenwood, the company I've quietly invested in for nearly 20 years. He set a cup of coffee down, watched me for a while, then said, "You still not ready to make a move?" I wiped my hands, looked at him. I don't want my daughter's wedding to turn into a battlefield. Mark let out a dry laugh. "She already started the war, Harold. You're just the only one who hasn't fired back." I didn't respond, just nodded. That afternoon Amelia called. Her voice trembled a bit, not from emotion, but from trying to stay calm. "Dad, about yesterday." I didn't know Dylan would go that far. He was just stressed. I narrowed my eyes. Stressed enough to punch his father-in-law in front of 200 people. Silence. Then she said softly, "Dylan's got a big investment coming up. He needs our house as collateral. You just need to sign it and everything will be fine." I laughed, a rough, hollow sound that echoed in the empty workshop. "Amelia, you know that house isn't just a place to live. It's the only thing your mother left behind." "I know. But Dad, you don't need all that space. That house could help us start something new." I ended the call. No anger, no sadness. Just that cold, sharp feeling inside like a blade freshly honed. 3 days later, Dylan showed up at the workshop. He walked in like he owned the place, white shirt, black tie, shiny shoes. I came to talk. Man to man, he said, his voice calm cold. I smiled. Good. But real men don't start conversations with their fists. He froze for a second, eyes narrowing like a blade catching light. "I get it. You're clinging to pride. But this world has no room for stubborn old men. If you don't sign, the house will be mine anyway. Only difference is, you'll walk away with nothing." I looked at him. The way he said nothing reminded me of the soldiers who fell beside me long ago. They died with empty hands, but their honor intact. Quietly, I said, "You really think you know everything about me, Dylan?" He shrugged. "I know enough. An old carpenter with a collapsing house, that's all." I smiled again. "Then don't be surprised when that old house learns how to stand on its own." After he left, I sat in the workshop watching the sunlight filter through the dusty windows. On the table was an old photo, Amelia and me, the day we opened our first shop. She was 10 hands covered in paint, smiling beside the wooden sign I carved, "McKenna Woodworks built with hands, not words." I sighed. Maybe I'd let her grow up in a world that only counts money and forgets the worth of labor. That evening, I got another message from Mark Harold. "The Havenwood board is voting on a new chairman. I think it's time you showed up." I stared at the screen for a while, feeling something heavy sink inside me. Time. Maybe it really was. Not for revenge, but to teach a few people a lesson using the one thing they've always overlooked, the truth. I typed back, "Tomorrow morning. Main conference room. Bring the shareholder records." Then I set the phone down and pulled the cover off the large table in the center of the shop. I'd spent half a year building it, every curve, every joint carved with precision down to the millimeter. I ran my hand across the smooth surface and thought, tomorrow. They'll see who really creates value. Outside, the rain started again. The sound on the tin roof was like a distant drumbeat, a storm drawing near. And this time, I'd be the one holding the reins. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, pale dawn light poured through the workshop windows, reflecting off the wood I'd finished the night before. I sat and stared for a long time, the grain flowing in even lines, solid and quiet, just like I felt inside. Everything was ready. I put on the white shirt I'd ironed, slipped into the old vest I wore the day Havenwood opened. My beat-up pickup rolled toward downtown Tacoma past rain-wet trees. I had no weapon but the truth. And truth is sharp enough. When I walked into Havenwood's main lobby, heads turned. Curiosity. A little disbelief. I hadn't shown up here in years. Most employees only knew me as the old woodworker from the early days. No one knew I still held 41% of the company through Mark and 2 small trusts. Mark waited at the conference room door suit, neat a thick folder in his hand. He nodded to me. Everything's set. Dylan's presenting his project to the investment board today. I smiled. Good. Perfect timing. The Havenwood boardroom was bright glass walls, showing the gray sky outside. Dylan stood in the center, gray suit, slick hair, pitching a revolutionary digital furniture project, if the company would fund it. Amelia sat beside him, taking notes, hopeful. When the door opened and I stepped in, the room froze. Dylan's voice cut off mid-sentence. His smile died. "What are you doing here?" he asked, low eyes burning. Calmly, I said, "I'm sitting in my seat." I walked to the head of the table, the empty chair meant for the interim chairman. Mark stood, placed the folder down, and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, I present Harold McKenna, founding shareholder and holder of 41% of Havenwood." Murmurs rippled through the room. Dylan went pale. Amelia stood stammering. "Dad." I didn't know I raised a hand to stop her. "Sit down, Amelia. Let me finish." I opened the folder and pulled out the funding contract Dylan had submitted to the board, the page that used my house as collateral with a forged signature. I handed it to Mark. He put it on the big screen. Everyone saw the shaky, sloppy scrawl, Harold McKenna. Not a match. "I think," I said, slowly, "before we talk about the future, we should be clear on who belongs in this room." Dylan fumbled an explanation, face ashen. I just wanted to grow the company. I thought you didn't care anymore." I looked him straight in the eye. "You're wrong. I just won't let liars soil the company I helped build." Mark hit play. The wedding video filled the screen. Dylan's punch. Blood on the floor. Soft laughter from a few guests. The room fell silent. Dylan stepped back, eyes bloodshot. "You're humiliating me." My voice stayed even. "No. I'm giving you one chance to see yourself." He shouted something. Security on Mark's signal escorted him out politely. When the door closed, only Amelia's breathing remained. She stood, tears falling. "Dad, why didn't you say anything sooner?" I looked at her for a long moment, then quietly, "Because I wanted you to see who to trust." The meeting ended. Mark handed me temporary control. I felt no triumph, no gloating, just a lightness like setting down a heavy beam I'd carried for years. On the drive home, I rolled the window down and let the cold wind hit my face. The rain had stopped, but the sky stayed heavy. I thought of Dylan, of Amelia, of that punch. Some wounds don't need revenge. Exposed to light, they hurt the guilty more than any blow. And I knew this was only the beginning of the real storm. That meeting ended in heavy silence. No one said a word as I left the room. Eyes followed me, some with respect, some in shock, others pretending not to see anything at all. I didn't blame them. In this world, silence is the safest choice. Out in the parking lot, Amelia came running after me. Her face was pale makeup, streaked with tears. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know he forged your signature." I stopped, turned to her. Didn't know, or didn't want to know. She said nothing. Her lips trembled. For a second, I saw her as a little girl again, standing by the workshop door, calling me her hero every time I finished a chair. But now, I saw a woman lost in the ruins she helped build. I didn't say another word. I just opened the truck door and said quietly, "Go home. What's between me and Dylan, the law will handle." 3 days later, the media started buzzing. A leaked video from the Havenwood meeting spread online, Dylan yelling, then being escorted out. Along with it came the old wedding clip, the punch, the blood, Amelia's silence. Overnight, the video hit 3 million views. Headlines screamed, "Young entrepreneur assaults, father-in-law forges documents to seize property." My phone wouldn't stop ringing, reporters, news channels, everyone wanted a comment. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was already speaking loud enough. Mark texted, "Dylan's been permanently suspended. The board's pressing charges for fraud and assault." I replied with one word, "Good." That afternoon, I drove back to the workshop. The early autumn wind blew through the drying boards, carrying the familiar scent of pine. On the table lay a letter from a lawyer, Dylan's request for a settlement, asking me to drop the charges to avoid prison. I read it, folded it neatly. Not out of hatred, but because some mistakes can't be erased with money. That evening, Amelia showed up at the door. She didn't knock, just stood there for a long time before whispering, "He's lost everything, Dad. Friends turned away, investors pulled out. He wants to see you. Just once." I looked toward the porch, where her mother's old chair still sat. To see me, for what he said he wants to apologize. I paused a few seconds, then said softly, "Someone truly sorry doesn't send his apology through someone else's mouth." Amelia lowered her head, tears falling onto her heels. I heard a quiet sob, not loud, not showy, but real. Different from all the times she faked weakness in front of others. I walked over, laid a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to defend anyone, honey. Just learn to face your mistakes and stand up again. No one can save you if you don't want to change." She nodded, lips pressed tight, then turned to leave. I knew our story wasn't over, but at least the door between us had cracked open. A week later, Dylan was arrested, charged with forgery and assault. The news flooded every screen, him in a gray coat, head down, police leading him away. People commented, mocked, shared. As for me, I turned the TV off. I didn't need to watch the man who once knocked me down. What I wanted to keep was the lesson, not the bitterness. That night I sat alone in the back of the workshop. From the next room came the sound of a saw, soft, careful. Amelia was there, cutting her first pieces of wood. She said she wanted to learn her mother's craft, to work with her hands, not her wallet. I didn't ask why. I just nodded and showed her how to guide the blade straight. The yellow light fell across her face, eyes still red but steady, and I realized sometimes a storm doesn't come to destroy, it comes to clear away the lies, so what's real can grow again. I watched her hands, small, shaking but trying. I smiled. "Slow down, Amelia. Everything takes time, even trust." And for the first time in months, I heard my daughter laugh. A small, rough, warm laugh echoing through the workshop, blending with the scent of pine. As if the storm outside had finally passed, leaving behind the first light of calm after the rain. Winter came early that year. The wind from Tacoma Bay howled through the tall pines, making the workshop door groan every time it opened. Since Dylan's sentencing, the house had grown quieter. No more arguments, no reporters calling, no strangers stopping by with questions. Just me, Amelia, and the faint scent of dry pine wood filling every breath. I still woke at 5, lit the stove, brewed my coffee, and turned on the lights in the shop. Amelia had started to settle into that rhythm too. She wasn't the polished city woman anymore, just a clumsy apprentice, her hands always covered in sawdust. Whenever she made mistakes, I didn't scold her. I simply adjusted the saw line and let her fix it herself. Some lessons can't be taught, only absorbed through time. One evening after cleaning up, Amelia brought me an old newspaper. On the front page, Havenwood Reborn, under its founder, Harold McKenna. She said softly, "Dad, aren't you going to return and run it again? People still want you back." I smiled, wiping my hands on my apron. I spent a lifetime building something that could stand on its own. Now that it can, I don't need to go back. The tighter you hold on, the easier it breaks. She fell silent, eyes down. I knew she still carried guilt about Dylan. Whenever the radio mentioned his trial, she'd turn it off. I never brought it up. Time has its own way of healing what words can't. Early in the new year, Amelia walked into the shop with a spark in her eyes. She wanted to design a new furniture line redemption. Pieces made from reclaimed wood carved with messages of forgiveness and rebirth. I listened, then nodded. Do it. But remember, don't make it just for people to buy. Make it for them to feel. For 3 months we worked side by side, barely stopping. The small shop slowly turned into something alive, each worn plank, becoming part of something new. When the collection was finally done, Amelia suggested a small exhibit right there in the workshop. I thought it'd be just a handful of old friends. But that night, dozens came: reporters, artists, design students. Even a representative from Havenwood. Amelia stood on a wooden platform, voice trembling but firm. I used to think strength was about taking. Now I know real strength is having the courage to make things right. This collection is for anyone who's ever fallen and still chose to stand again. I stood in the back, eyes stinging. For the first time, she wasn't the girl running from her mistakes. She was a woman facing them. After the show orders poured in, but I asked her to keep just one piece, a long white oak table. I wanted it in the center of the workshop where we always worked together. One afternoon, I sat carving a few words into an old wooden sign. The faded engraving read, "Respect is not inherited. It's built." I added a new line beneath it, "and rebuilt if you have the courage." Amelia walked over, looked at it and asked Dad, "Do you think Dylan can change?" I didn't look up, just finished the last stroke. Anyone can change, but not everyone wants to. She nodded quietly. Months later, I received an envelope from the federal prison. I didn't have to open it to know who it was from. Still, I did. Inside was a small piece of paper, handwriting, shaky and uneven. "I don't deserve to be your son-in-law, but thank you for not pushing me further down. When I get out, I'd like to ask for a job in your shop." I read it, felt no anger, no pity either, just a kind of lightness. I placed the letter next to that carved sign, a part of the past that didn't need to be erased. That night, Amelia and I sat on the porch watching the snow fall. Warm light spilled from the workshop behind us. She asked Dad, "If you could go back to that day, would you dodge the punch?" I thought for a while, then said no. Because sometimes a punch is the quickest way to see who's really standing with you. She smiled and rested her head on my shoulder. I looked out at the snow, each flake drifting down like a piece of memory. My story, once marked by wounds, had quietly turned into one of healing. And as the wind whispered through the wooden walls, I found myself thinking, happiness isn't about being respected. It's about respecting yourself, even when the world doesn't. Maybe that's where my story should end. I've lost many things: trust, reputation, a piece of my family. But in return, I've found myself again, and peace in the sound of sawdust every morning, and in my daughter's first real laugh. If you've listened this far, thank you. Tell me where you're listening from. And if stories like this speak to you, don't forget to leave a kind word or a follow so I can keep sharing more of them. Thank you truly.